Welcome to Education Perspectives. I am your host, Liza Holland. This is a podcast that explores the role of education in our society from a variety of lenses. Education needs to evolve to meet the needs of today and the future. Solving such huge issues requires understanding. Join me as we begin to explore the many perspectives of education. I am delighted to welcome Dr. Lou Young to Education Perspectives. Lou is a key leader in education for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. She is the executive director of the University of Kentucky Center for Next Generation Leadership and also serves as chair of the Kentucky State Board of Education. Previously, she served as chief academic officer of Fayette County Public Schools and before that, superintendent of Jessamine County Schools for 9 years. Lou Young, thank you so very much for being a part of Education Perspectives. Welcome.
Hi, Liza. Glad to be here.
Well, you of all people have an incredible number of perspectives on education. And I absolutely love that you have so many different views on this amazing thing that we call our education system today. But I'd love to just kind of get your perspective. Sometimes I think we don't back up far enough. What do you think? Why do you think society should educate its populace?
Yeah, I love that question. Thanks for asking. I am an unabashed believer in the absolute critical importance of public education to our democracy. And the framers of our Constitution envisioned what it would look like in a democracy and what hard work that might entail. And while they didn't actually think about education, they built a platform upon which public education could thrive. And I believe in that work. And despite the political turmoil that we often face and the lightning rod that public education can be in the discourse, I keep coming back to the fact that we are the government's, the country's funnel for all things citizenship related for the good of our nation. And so I don't think you could overstate how important public education is to the lives of families and certainly to the health of the country.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And it's amazing sometimes that we don't stop to think that what we're really doing is preparing good citizens. You know, we're preparing people to get into the workforce and to contribute to our economy and contribute to our democracy.
And I think that's the human element that's so important. And I don't say that to discount the importance of public education to the health of our economy either. We do prepare the future workforce. And while that's not the reason I went into public education, it's certainly a responsibility for that work. And so, again, I don't think you could underestimate how important it is for our own economic development and the creative future of America through the support of a strong, well-funded, well-supported public education system.
Well, that's a nice segue because I think one of the things that I hope to do with this podcast is to help to humanize the folks that are involved in education. And, you know, in this divisive situation that we find ourselves in, I think it's important to know the people behind all of this. So what drew you to education in the first place?
So I was a little bit of a latecomer. I didn't decide to major in education until I was a sophomore at the university. And what I found was that the courses I was taking in Spanish, the courses I was taking that had to do with interacting with people were where my strengths lay. The more I reflected as a university student about where my joy came from, I realized it was with the interaction with other people. So as a Spanish major at the time, teaching was certainly at the top of the list of possible outcomes in terms of degree. And so I started volunteering at a local Catholic school, being in the classroom, teaching Spanish on the side as just a special area for students who were interested. And I was hooked. I just fell in love with that. And I've never looked back. I'm just started my 40th year in education, 31 and a half in P12 and finishing 8 years here at the university.
That is fantastic. You know, and so many people have had different types of journeys as they approach the education system, myself included. Tell me, you have so many things that you're doing. Maybe tell the audience a little bit about the various roles that you are playing in education at this point.
Sure. I kind of have my cake and eat it too now, Liza. I am at the University of Kentucky, where I serve in a dual role in the College of Education. In the Department of Education Leadership Studies, I'm an associate clinical professor, and I teach classes for aspiring principals and aspiring superintendents. So that's a real circle of life experience for me when I can look back at my own leadership career and then be able to train up those who are coming behind me that want to be principals, assistant principals, superintendents, assistant superintendents, and other perhaps even less formal leaders in schools. So that leadership coursework is real joy for me. The other half of my job at UK is equally joyful. I am the executive director of the UK Center for Next Generation Leadership, and we are a professional learning outreach arm of the College of Education. So we spend our time with schools and districts all across the Commonwealth talking about deeper, more personalized learning as a path to equity. So we work with schools to provide professional development training, to provide consulting services, to help with strategic planning, and whatever the need is. If we've got the expertise, we're happy to help out with schools and districts. And so that gives me an opportunity to be all around the Commonwealth. My side hustle, as I jokingly talk about it, is that I am the very proud chair of the Kentucky Board of Education. I was appointed by Governor Beshear in December of 2019, became chair in April of 2020, and we meet about every other month, and we are charged with meeting out the regulations of the Department of Education and all statutes and regulations related to public education in Kentucky. It is really rewarding work, and it is a great opportunity for me personally to have an impact at the state level. So it's kind of new ground being plowed for me, if you will. And I absolutely love that work. I love working with our commissioner, the team at the department, and then it keeps me in touch with superintendents and school leaders all across Kentucky. And my real joy, I get to spend time with teachers, and then from time to time, even in classrooms.
I think you may have answered part of the next question. Is tell me a little bit about what you love about what you do in education.
There is, I think this may be the third or fourth time I've said the word joy, but there is so much joy in this work. I believe that humans are wired to learn, to be curious, to want to know. And our job as educators is to facilitate that experience in as professional a way we can, working with individuals. And so whether that's professional learning with adults, teaching a little guy to read, teaching middle school social studies, whatever that looks like, whatever the context is, there is so much joy in the profession of education. And I don't miss an opportunity to encourage young people who are thinking about their own professional futures to take a really close look at becoming a teacher or a school leader or both, because there's no more important career. All the other careers depend on us as educators, and it's just fun, life-giving, life-affirming work. And I don't look back over the past 40 years as an educator with any regret.
That's fantastic. Would you care to share with us a particular story about your time in education that brought you that joy?
Oh my goodness, there are many, many, many of those. I think about individual students whom I've taught or worked with in administration over the years. I will tell you a kind of a broad memory experience I had in 1996. Jessamine County Schools split into two high schools for the first time. And it was my first administrative position. I went as assistant principal at East Jessamine High in its first year with two dear colleagues, Tom Welch, who was principal, and my other assistant principal colleague, Owen Saylor, who is recently retired as superintendent of Davis County. And so the three of us had never been school administrators before. You wonder about the wisdom of the district leadership who said, yeah, we'll give you the keys, go build a new school. But that experience, I look back on it all the time because it's rare that you have an opportunity to start a school from scratch, literally build it from the ground up. And with Tom and Owen, we came together to envision a school of the future, what it would look like if we engaged students in the planning and building of their own school. We took kids out with hard hats to the site when it was being built and said, this is going to be your new school. This is where the cafeteria is going to be, and really engaging them from the inception of the school until it was open. And I'm really proud to say, from everything I know about and read about East Jessamine High, that DNA is still there. They are an inclusive school. Student voice and agency still matters. And that work is legacy work that I'm really, really proud of.
That is marvelous. And that whole building and creating, Lou and I actually got to know one another probably the closest through the building of the STEAM Academy here in Lexington, Kentucky. And, it's a lot like democracy. It starts out, it's a little bit messy, and you're trying several different things before you find the one that works. But I think that it's so healthy and so energizing. It was great to see the teachers there get engaged in that process because they felt that they had agency.
Also, one of my favorite memories. Unfortunately, I still work with STEAM. We provide professional development support out there. I still get to see the team. And then knowing where we came from physically, from the old building to the beautiful new building at 1555 Georgetown Road, is another one of those legacy moments that I'm really proud of. And in both cases, East Jessamine High, STEAM, the conversations and the aspirations were around a bold new future of teaching and learning for kids. And that's what really revs my engine as a school leader.
Well, that's a lot of where we sort of need to go with our education system. We are built on a foundation that was put together for a very different time. And so we're kind of getting to the point where we need to teach differently in order to be able to provide the citizens that for an information economy. But there's a lot of obstacles to that. So I would love to have you chat a little bit about maybe how the bureaucracy as it stands holds innovation back, or obstacles that you have faced that we may need to think about trying to overcome or remove.
Sure. I'd be happy to reflect on that with you and dream a little bit. I'm an abundance mentality kind of gal, so I'll own that from the very beginning. And I see so much opportunity right now and a convergence of efforts that give me great hope for the future of public schools in Kentucky. At the State Board of Education level, our commissioner spent his first year plus on the job listening to Kentuckians. It was during the pandemic when he came on board, and so much of that happened virtually, but with some intentional engagement of stakeholders that included students, families, community members, educators, government officials, and leaders. And in those conversations, a real directive for a new future of learning in Kentucky became apparent. And so he and his team and the state board and I have leveraged that listening tour and all of the information we received from hundreds of Kentucky stakeholders to launch Kentucky United We Learn, which is a large-scale vision effort to focus on 3 different areas to really change the trajectory and the scope of education in the Commonwealth. And those 3 areas are meaningful learning experiences, vibrant and meaningful learning experiences for every child, innovation, which includes innovation applied to state assessment and accountability, which is often one of those 800-pound gorilla obstacles that you were talking about earlier. And then lastly, with deep community engagement. So not top-down, bureaucratic, compliance-oriented improvement and change, but instead one that is grassroots, community-engaged, equity-centered kind of change. And so we're beginning to pivot the organization and districts and certainly the conversation around those 3 big areas. And I get really excited when I think about our focus being on ensuring that every learner in Kentucky experiences vibrant and meaningful, relevant learning. And that's all kids all the time. That's not some kids some of the time, but instead it is an opportunity for us to think about the needs of every learner. We can't throw kids away anymore. Nobody ever did that intentionally, so please don't misunderstand. But the time now, the challenge before us in 2022 is to ensure that every learner has the kinds of experiences that will prepare him or her well for college, career, and life after P-12 school. So I'm excited about that new vision. There are lots of other obstacles and barriers that we have to think about, not to dismiss 3 decades of failed reform. No Child Left Behind was very well intended, but in its implementation, we began to see that top-down test-driven mandates began to change the experience of kids and teachers in the classroom. We became very focused on testing. We lost a lot of what we often longingly refer to as teachable moments. A lot of the joy of teaching and learning was lost during a time when test-based accountability became too much of our focus. We are now in the Every Student Succeeds Act era of federal government expectations for public education. And in that, along with the Kentucky United We Learn, initiative, I find great hope for moving back to what I would call our roots of John Dewey and Maria Montessori and high levels of student engagement and relevant learning. And that's what our team at UK Next Gen is all about. And those conversations are flourishing across Kentucky right now.
Well, that hope is such a great thing. And I am super excited to be a part of it. To let the audience know, I have actually joined the Next Gen team as communication specialist to be able to help to support their work and get it out to let other people know about it. And honestly, this whole United We Learn initiative really appeals to me. If you all haven't seen it, I'll link it in the show notes, but go out and read what has been done, because it's not top down. It is totally grassroots. It reached out to all different types of stakeholders, and especially included the ones that were not serving well. And, talking about how we can actually do that, that's really where a lot of those unique student services come from. I know that United We Learn is kind of we've come through all this great planning, and we've done some great definitions of some of our different stakeholders and whatnot. What do you see next for the initiative?
Yeah, so it's also I've really loved the fact that the commissioner has been committed to emergence as we've walked through the various phases of United We Learn. And what I mean by that is that we don't have all of the answers yet. So we're watching what's working, happening as folks try out some things. And then from that is this emergence of what we see as best practices that schools and districts are ready for across Kentucky. So really trying to build solid foundation before we try to retool everything. So we call those districts that are formally trying out United We Learn elements local laboratories of learning. And the acronym for that is L3. And these L3 schools and districts are trying various deeper learning strategies and engaging their communities around what they look like and what they feel like in practice, bringing teachers and students on board as they try out different things. And so these often look like what we call a portrait of a learner, where communities and school folks come together to say, we want, in addition to Kentucky academic standards, that's the knowledge, the content side of things. And of course, that is our core business. But we know that that is not sufficient in the 21st century when we think about all of the globalization and the experiences post-pandemic that communities have lived through. And so in light of all of the rapid changes in this 21st century high-tech post-pandemic world, just knowing stuff isn't good enough anymore. You have to have content knowledge, don't misunderstand. But in addition to that, we need to help our students become better communicators, collaborators, thinkers, agents of their own learning, self-advocates. They need to be more creative, more curious. So how do we broaden our expectations and aspirations for learners to include the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that every productive citizen of the U.S. must demonstrate as our economy and the demands on our country change? So having said that, there's a lot of different ways to get there, right? And the last thing we want to do as policy leaders and thinkers in Kentucky is to prescribe one more failed reform initiative. Instead, this is about learning together at the grassroots level, community-based engagement across Kentucky, and trying things out. So Portrait of a Learner is one of those prototypes that is getting a lot of traction. Shelby County Schools is engaging their broader business and industry community to say, we want to look at our Portrait of a Learner in Shelby County Schools and then talk about how that matriculates right into the local workforce and provides growth in the local economy. So there are many community leaders in Shelby County who are part of the L3 work that say, if it's good and happening in P12 schools and it's good for our business, then we want to lock arms around this. Other L3 districts are looking at measures of success beyond test scores, which really speaks to my heart when it comes to innovation around assessment and accountability. We have to help kids, teachers, and families look bigger than test scores. Our kids are more than a score. Our kids demonstrate what they know and can do in ways other than tests. And we need to value all of the ways kids can show us what they learn And so we have some districts that are saying, yeah, we're going to figure out what that looks like. We're going to measure what really matters. Test scores will likely be a slice of that. Again, we still want kids to know stuff. But in addition to the test scores, what do we want? How will we measure our success? And to whom are we accountable? We're not accountable only to the federal government or the state government. We're accountable to the kids we serve, to the educators in the system, and to the families across our communities. And we need to engage them in this new, bold future.
I wish I had an applause track for that one.
Good. I talk a lot, Liza. Sorry.
No, that's wonderful because and honestly, I would love for you to talk about it a little bit more. I understand that the state has gotten a really nice sized grant about exploring different ways of accountability because I think all of us know that you get what you measure for. You know, if you're in the office and you have a sales quota, that's what you are going to be held accountable for. That's what you'll get in trouble if you don't do it right. But is that really moving the business forward? You know, you really need to think about what it is that we really, really want. And a lot of those additional skill sets are exactly what businesses and our society need in general, because I love the way Tony Wagner says, you have content in your pocket. It's right there in your phone. And so we're in a very different type of a world. So I would love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts as far as Kentucky expanding the what we measure portion of things.
Sure, I'm happy to. The grant you mentioned is the competitive grant for state assessments. It was released as a proposal process by the federal government late last spring, and Kentucky was one of the fortunate grant recipients. And I'm so proud of the CGSA team for all of the work they did in writing it. It all aligned, coalesced, grew out of the United We Learn efforts. And the stated purpose of the CGSA grant awards was to find ways to enhance the quality of state assessment and accountability. And in that, innovation was encouraged. And so if you talk to a teacher, she's likely going to be wringing her hands about her students' test scores, especially as they relate to reading and math, because that was the no child left behind coin of the realm. It was all about better reading scores and better math scores. And you need to know that we are all concerned about math proficiency and reading proficiency in Kentucky. Important conversation. And what I'm saying now does not in any way detract from that conversation. But as I mentioned earlier, moving forward, we've got to think more aspirationally about the whole child. Reading, math, science, social studies, all of the content areas, including the arts. But we also have to think about those 21st century transcendent skills that I mentioned earlier. So how do we get back to our whole child roots and think about assessment and accountability in such a way that we can give credence and respect for the whole child in the state assessment and accountability system? So not just how well she reads or how well she does math, as measured by a pencil, paper, or online test, but also how does she think about her work? Is she creative? If so, how do we know that? What evidence can teachers and students themselves collect about their own learning over time that we can value and measure as part of the system? If you ask me as a grandmother what I want for my own grandchildren, I'm going to talk about wanting them to read well and to do math well, but I'm also going to want them to be kind and to be thinkers and to own their own learning and to be responsible and to collaborate with others and to be self-sufficient. I want that whole child experience for my grandchildren, just like you do for your own children, Liza. Yet the system doesn't account for all of that whole child development, much of which actually happens while kids are in school. And so teachers will tell you that they are working all the time on developing that whole child, developing all of her knowledge, skills, and dispositions. Their success is often boiled down to reading and math scores. Mm-hmm. So thinking bigger than that, using the CGSA grant initiative along with United We Learn and other funding down the road to really operationalize around this idea of knowledge, skills, and dispositions, the whole child. The Kentucky Portrait of a Learner, which was just adopted last week by the State Board of Ed. Bringing all that together for me is the work that's happening now. So again, that's the optimism I have, the great hope I have. This effort underway right now will yield amazing benefits for decades to come.
Boy, that's so incredibly exciting. It really is. But unfortunately, we've still got a long way to go with it. I've been telling friends that when that huge ship got stuck in the canal over the COVID time period, they had to come up with a tremendous amount of new and innovative ways to be able to get that boat unstuck. And I thought it was a great kind of allegory for the education system, is that we are really big and it's so hard to move a ship of that size, and that we do indeed need to be a bit innovative with that. And the rest of us need to be patient because we're working really, really hard. But that kind of change takes time.
Agreed.
So my last regular question for guests is, what would you like for decision makers to know? You obviously are one of those big decision makers, but we also have legislators there. Quite frankly, we have voters. We're coming up on that great voting season, and education tends to be pretty siloed. So any insights as to what you would like other folks to know that are making decisions?
Sure. I think about this a lot if I'm preparing to present at a legislative session or having informal conversations with members of the General Assembly, other agency, executive branch leaders. And what I'm always so happily struck by is that we always have more in common than differences when it comes to talking about teaching and learning and Kentucky's children and youth. So for me, really getting the message focused with the student, the learner in the center, I think is our best strategy, genuine strategy to engage hearts and minds around the work that we're doing with Kentucky United We Learn and the future of teaching and learning in the Commonwealth. So what I mean by that is, if we can eschew all of the other trappings, the barriers that we might experience that divide us, and instead really focus on what we want for kids, it becomes a lot easier. It's pure. We are often so close together when we talk with business leaders. Portrait of a Learner makes sense to them because they want employees that demonstrate those skills. They often say to us, we can teach them what they need to know. If you will give good citizens, good actors to us, we can take it from there. And that's not always the case, of course, but finding that common ground, I think, is the worthy pursuit in front of us right now, because teaching and learning shouldn't be divisive. The public education experience should be one that brings us all closer and closer together along the way. So that would be my message. And I hope it doesn't sound Pollyanna, because I really do believe that the best comes out of us when we are thinking about what we want for all kids. And as we started at the top of the podcast, if it's good for kids and families, it's good for America, for the economy, for democracy, for humanity as we move forward. So I think that is a great way to bring us back around to the top. I also want them to know that teachers are still the best people on the planet. Teachers were really feeling heavy burdened toward the end of the pandemic because they, like families, were so stressed out about the difficulties that kids experienced, the disruptions that kids experienced through COVID. And they internalized a lot of that and felt guilty and bad about it. And people were saying bad things about teachers. And none of that rarely is any of that deserved, because teachers always want their students to do well and to have good learning experiences. So reminding everybody about how important educators are in the lives of children in the past and will always be in the future, I think, is another one of those messages that unify us and help us to get past some of our divide.
I could not have said it better. I would have to echo to those of you who are listening. Really, one of the reasons we set up Education Perspectives the way we did is because you need to get to know these people. It's real easy to go teachers as a whole and get upset, but individuals that really care about your kids and care about what they're learning. I mean, stop and think a minute. They were asked in like a week's time to flip over to do virtual learning, which none of them had been trained to do. So people are real ready to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but I think we need to look for those silver linings. I've been accused of being a Pollyanna myself, but
Wear it proudly,
Some
Liza.
respects.
I do.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But it really does. And so next time you're thinking about your teachers or your administrators or whatever, you're in the building, give them an extra pat and say, thanks so much for what we do, because they do a tremendous amount that our entire society depends upon, and we don't pay them well to do so.
Which could be yet another plank in my platform to share.
There we go. There we go. Anything that we haven't talked about today that you would love to have education interested folks hear?
I guess I will. I don't want to miss a chance to call out the crisis, perhaps slightly manufactured, but certainly the concern that we all have about the educator workforce pipeline. I was in a meeting within the past month with superintendents in one geographic region, and when asked if they had vacancies to fill in September, more than half the hands went up. So, and we see it in even more dire illustrations in Jefferson County and in other places. And it's happening all across the country, not just in Kentucky. And there are lots and lots of reasons why folks aren't going into education anymore. Compensation being high on the list. As you mentioned earlier, we don't pay teachers enough for the hard work that they do on behalf of kids and families. But the result of that over a series of years is that we have a looming crisis in terms of having high quality teachers in every classroom in Kentucky. And so I know that the legislature is having those conversations now. They are thinking about what legislative support, policy support they might enact that would help us with that problem. School and district leaders everywhere are engaging in those conversations. But not only do we need to deepen the educator workforce pool, we need to diversify it. We also need to be finding representative educators who, when you look across Kentucky, represent the same diversity in population as our students. And that's not the case now either. So deepening the education workforce, diversifying it, and then building high quality teaching conditions for those who are in the workforce. We're not going to be able to recruit and we can't retain if we don't improve those working conditions. So some kind of gestalt among encouraging people to enter the profession, encouraging people to stay in the profession by improving their professional experience day in and day out. There's a secret sauce in there somewhere that we need to all be thinking about at the policy level, certainly. But even when I talk to young people, I want them to know what an amazing profession education really is and what opportunities they have. Some of that's going to be rethinking the professional experience and re-professionalizing, or perhaps for the first time, professionalizing the experience for every educator in every school district. So it's a challenge. It's a big hill to be climbed. I'm thrilled to see how many conversations are happening, and we need to ratchet up our timeline on some creative and substantive solutions to those workforce needs.
Absolutely. And I'm going to do just a little plug here from our last episode. I had the joy of speaking to a teaching student who is just entering the profession, Caitlin Bowman from the University of Kentucky. And one of the things that she was really concerned about was don't fill the gaps just with bodies. Make sure that you figure out how to actually give them some education and some space as far as how to manage, because whether you know it or not, you can't walk into a classroom and be a teacher. You just can't. Maybe you could be a sub, but if you're going to go that direction, you need to spend time in learning about how to teach about learning.
Absolutely.
So,
it is both art and science.
Yeah.
And we begin to chip away at the professionalization of the career of education as a profession when we get into this mindset that anybody can do it. If you haven't seen Kindergarten Cop in a while, watch it again. So
that's a great thing.
Teachers Without Strategies look a lot like Arnold Schwarzenegger in that movie. So it's not for everybody, but if you try it and you love it, we do have alternative paths to certification in Kentucky, and with the right supports, they can be very successful. But just cutting corners to get those bodies in the classroom might, in fact, do harm. So I think Caitlin is very wise in her thinking about her caution about just thinking you can put anybody in a classroom and everything will be okay.
Hear, hear. Well, kudos to the teachers and to the administrators and to the leaders, because this is such a worthwhile effort. And I appreciate you so much taking some time to chat with me today on this incredibly important topic.
It was my pleasure, my friend. It's always good to work with you, and we are thrilled to have you at the UK Center for Next Generation Leadership.
Yay. Thanks so much. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Education Perspectives. Feel free to share your thoughts on our Facebook page. Let us know which education perspectives you would like to hear or share. Please subscribe and share with your friends.